So please remember just one thing. Do not ever give up. For if you do, there'll be no one to ever lift you up. Ever lift you up. The time has come. There's no time to waste. So why not take a chance? For if you don't, there'll be no one to ever dance the dance. Ever dance the dance. Get yourself up, get yourself up. Get yourself up, get yourself up. Get yourself up, well get yourself up. Get yourself right up right now. You've got the power. You've got the soul. You've got the love to make you whole. You've got the love to make you whole. So you might be wondering why I'm singing this song in a program about innovation. And the reason is I end up talking to a lot of creative outliers. And creative outliers are people who take chances. But people who take chances, who are change agents, they get a lot of negative feedback. So that's why I have to remind them to get themselves up, because there isn't anybody else who's going to do it. If you want to change the world or get anybody to adopt any of your ideas, you're going to have to be a little bit pushy. And you really don't have time to wonder about, well, is this good enough, or should I do it, or will they like it? Pandering never works. You have to be who you are. So just get over it and get yourself up. So I deliberately wrote that song for creative outliers to remind them that when you're going to be a change agent, you have to do a lot of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. The permission givers and the decision makers and the investors and the people who think they're running things, they are not going to give you positive feedback. You're going to have to convince them that your ideas are worthwhile. And to do that, you have to first get yourself up. Then, after you get yourself up, you have to do actually more than that. And I've been writing to try to convince people that creativity is worthwhile, that innovation is worth doing. And whether it's this TV show or my columns or my books or my blog, they're all about the same thing. They're all about helping creative outliers become innovators. Right now, we're in an age of extreme chaos and confusion. And this is the time for the innovators to rise. It's pretty clear that the people in charge don't know what to do. They don't know what to do economically. They don't know what to do politically. They don't know what to do psycho-spiritually. So the creative outliers are the population from which the innovators arise. And then the innovators are the ones who are successful at getting people to listen to what they have to say so that their ideas can be adopted. The innovators are the people who create tomorrow, not the politicians, not the businessmen, unless they're innovators. So I think it's time to sing a little bit about that. By the way, this is a plastic guitar trying to sound like a jazz guitar. And I think that this is actually the future of guitars. Being a carbon fiber guitar, it stays in tune. So open your eyes and look all around you. There's plenty of things to be seen. Plenty of things happening about you. Don't you see what I mean? Don't waste your time on sitting and waiting for someone to tell you what to do. Just get yourself moving and see what you can do. So open your eyes and look all around you. There's plenty of things happening that you're not doing yet. Plenty of things happening about you. Don't you see what I mean? Don't waste your time on sitting and waiting for something to happen to you. Just get yourself moving and see what you can do. Open your eyes. So I guess it is time to talk a little bit about this guitar. Sort of mellow, huh? Mellower than a plastic guitar ought to be, by all rights. Well, it's not entirely plastic. It has carbon fiber in it. And why would anybody want to put carbon fiber in a guitar? Well, there's a really good reason. We're here in New England, where the temperature gets really cold and really hot and really humid, and it does a real number on wooden acoustical instruments. They get out of tune, they get cracked, they get busted, the finish gets messed up. A plastic guitar you could leave in the trunk of your car in the winter, and it doesn't get wrecked. That's a really great thing. And another fringe benefit of this is, because it's so environmentally stable, you only have to tune it about once a week instead of every time you play or in the middle of a song. So having a guitar that stays in tune, that doesn't get busted from New England winters or summers, that's pretty cool. But that's not where it ends. And if you can zoom in on this, I got to show you this. You see where the cable's plugged in? There is a USB-C port on this guitar and a headphone jack and a conventional quarter-inch jack, which means you can plug this into a computer. I plug it into my Mac, and you can record guitar right into your computer, or this cable's going into a sound system, and it has a headphone jack, so I can get up early in the morning and play the guitar and rock out and not wake up my wife. And that's a lot of extra points. Having a guitar that you can play whenever you want without disturbing anybody, and it still sounds loud, that's very cool. But that's not where it ends. And no, I am not affiliated with this company, and I don't make any money. I just think this is the future of guitars because I'm in the innovation biz. It's got reverb and delay and distortion and modulation. It has built-in effects and even has a built-in speaker, which we're not listening to here. That would be really pushing it, the studio, to expect a little teeny speaker to sound good enough. But it does sound good enough in a living room if you wanted to actually play with a harmonica player, which I did 2 days ago at a party. Some guy was playing a harmonica along with his YouTube videos on his iPad, and I told him to put away his iPad, and I took out the guitar and played it out of here. So it's got humbucking pickups like a regular Gibson Les Paul. It's the same scale length as like a jazz guitar. Split pickups, so you can get like the sound like a Fender. Regular pickup selector, and all these inputs and outputs. I truly believe that the guitar companies are going to be in deep trouble when the manufacturers can make these things for between $200 and $400 and sell them for between $200 and $400, not make them. It probably cost only $100 to make. Why would somebody want to buy a $10,000 guitar that they have to worry about the weather when they can buy a $400 guitar and do a gig with it. So, yeah, I guess that probably deserves a song too. I don't know what I'm going to play yet, but here we go. A little slower. Now get started. Now get moving. Not sure where to start, not sure what to do right now. Now get started. If you're an innovator, you're spending a lot of time thinking about when you should get started. And the answer is now. Get started. Find out what to do. Find out where to start. Right now, because change is needed. The change right now. So, find out where to start. Find out what to do. Open up your heart. And finally, it's time to do it. Find out what to do. Find out where to start. Right now. Find out what to do. Find out where to start. Right now. Find out what to do. Find out where to start right now. So, if you're in the innovation business, the time to get started is when you're ready. Not when the market's ready, not when your boss is ready, not when your friends tell you it's time. The time to start is when you are ready. And if you have a really good idea and it's sort of burning you up that you got to do it, then do it right now. So we live in a chaotic world. It needs change agents really badly because the systems that we have are doing exactly what they were designed to do. It just happens to not be the right thing anymore because the world changed and we designed the systems a long time ago. And yeah, they're functioning properly, but they're doing the wrong thing. So we need new systems which will be invented by change agents. That's you. And let's say you're a creative outlier and you want it to be an innovator. So what's the difference between a creative outlier and an innovator anyway? Well, I think everybody is born as a creative outlier. I mean, did you ever see a 3 or 4-year-old kid who thought they weren't creative? It doesn't happen. But how many 30 or 40-year-olds still think that they're creative? Not too many. What happens? Well, they get mortgages and kids and responsibilities, and then they sort of stop being creative. Except some people don't. And those are the ones who are the creative outliers. Even when they become adults, they don't outgrow their childlike curiosity, enthusiasm, thinking they can do things, and then all the adults around say things to them like, why don't you grow up? And they don't listen because they don't really have a choice. So let's say you're that 1 in 100 who didn't listen and didn't grow up and didn't get so socialized that you were afraid to create, but you wanted to become an innovator. So what's an innovator? An innovator is somebody who has insight. They know something that everybody else doesn't know. Well, lots of people do that. All the creative outliers have insight. But to get it adopted by other people, that's when you become an innovator, when your ideas and your insights start to be embraced by other people. That's the definition of innovation, adopted insight. So how do you get there? How do you get from being a creative outlier, the population from which innovators emerge? You can't become an innovator unless you were first a creative outlier, because you had to have insight, right? Well, here's the problem. Most really creative people have a hard time putting themselves in the place, in the mindset of the people that they're trying to get as stakeholders, whether as employees, investors, get permission, get resources. Even if you're super creative, you still need other stakeholders. You need other people who can provide the other resources that you need. And you can learn how to go from being a creative outlier to an innovator. That's what I've been doing for the last, 25 years as an innovation guy, and before that as an innovator. And I found out that the first thing is you had to kind of get permission from people to lay all your stuff on them, or they weren't going to listen. So you had to put yourself in where their mind was and think about what would be emotionally relevant to these decision makers and permission givers and funders. If you can't figure out what's in it for them, why should they figure out what's in it for you? They're not going to. So the real key is you've got to put yourself in their place. And in the remaining 30 seconds, I'm going to try to rip through the rest of my one slide. Okay. If either insight or adoption is missing, you are not an innovator. What do you need? You need a business model. Sustainability requires a business. Nobody's going to adopt your ideas instantly. It takes time. There must be a legitimate business model. And the third difference is you have to have agency. Agency is the ability to make things happen, not just to talk about them. You need to be able to make things happen. And that's what my songs were all about, making it happen right now. So go forth and transform yourself from a creative outlier into an innovator right now. Well, welcome to Harvesting Infinity, episode 15, which is pretty amazing because we've only been doing it for a week, so that's like 2 a day. No, it's actually a year and a quarter. And today I have my 2 pals with me, David Grunett and Jim Lawrence, and we're going to talk about a lot of things. But before we start to talk about those lot of things, I want these guys to tell you a little bit about who they are, because I think they can represent themselves better than I can represent them. And you already know who I am. So, David, who are you?
Name's David Gannett. I'm a writer. I'm publishing a series of climate fiction books. The series is called The Steep Climbs Quartet. I've been a writer for a long time, although not fiction. I was first a book editor, and then I got into electronic publishing and served as a journalist, and then as an editor. So we have, editorials and articles and that sort of thing. But about 10 years ago, I started this series called something other than the Steep Climbs Quartet at the time, and thought to be one book, but it turns out to be a 4-book series. And it's about climate change, hence it's a matter of being climate fiction. But it takes place across the 4 books, starting in the first book at 2026, and the last book in 2047. And so far, the first 2 books are published. Kill Well's the first one, the one that takes place in 2026, and Dear Josephine is the one that takes place in 2029. Those are both available out in the world, as we say, for better or worse, we shall see.
So is this science fiction or science prediction?
Well, so climate fiction is this really clumsy genre term, which really isn't a genre description as much as a subject matter description. Since these books are in the future, albeit very, in the first book, very near future, and even in the second book, 2029, that's still near future, and even the third book, 2035, that's what we call mid-future, and even 2047, the last one, is not appreciably that far into the future. So they have, because of that, it's often thought of as science fiction. I don't really have a horse in that hunt. I'm not sure what one should call it, other than eminently readable and enjoyable.
Absolutely.
How about historical fiction from a forward-thinking guy?
Which is speculative
That's
historical
good.
fiction.
I will. I'll rewrite my history for that.
Okay, so
I have a question. What is Kilwell a pun?
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Of course it is.
Somebody actually asked him that question.
Yes. Yeah, I was giving a talk yesterday up in the Berkshire Athenaeum, and someone asked me that question, and I had to confess that, of course, it's a pun. I mean, it's a serious pun, because there are murders that take place, so the question of whether or not one kills well is to be considered. The answer is no, they don't. But the other is, since the story involves oil divestiture activists, they're trying to stop fossil fuel, in effect, killing the oil wells.
And is it true that you have another talk coming up tomorrow?
I do. I'll be at Mason Library tomorrow, 4 o'clock. The future of climate change in the Berkshires.
So we're not fooling around here. We got serious erudition here. So Jim.
Very good. Yeah, my name is Jim Lawrence, and I'm a transplant to the Berkshires from California 25 years ago. And I was an actor out there for about 10 years, did some films with Kirk Douglas and some other people who were very famous, had a lot of fun. A TV show called SWAT, which was a lot of fun and didn't last nearly long enough, or I would have not had to drive out a broken down old Beetle to get out here. No, it wasn't that bad. And I became a writer, magazine writer for a publisher who had photography and digital photography then, and ultralight aircraft, and Planet Pilot magazine was another one, and Pilot Journal. So I got to fly and write and edit more than anyone should have a right to be able to do without qualifications. I just taught myself everything and had a ball for 30 years almost. Wrote 4 books on nature photography with some of the leading photographers of the day, nature photographers. David Munch, Franz Lanting, forgetting some of the other names, but they each were responsible for, the last book I did was called Celebration of the Land. It's still available on Amazon. It's about 10 pounds, and that's just the paperweight of it, not the importance of the writing. But the photographers had their work from each biosphere that they were famous for documenting, because these are disappearing places like the Galapagos. Tui de Roy was a photographer there, and so on. And so I got to interview them over the phone because they didn't have the budget to send me there, and I had to evoke atmosphere and smells and feelings and the spiritual aspect of their being there, because all the photographers I wrote about were very spiritually connected with their work and would look for that as they went out into the land to photograph. So that carried over into the book I'm writing on, which is a novel about a group of hang glider pilots, because that's sort of my métier from the 70s, and who was abducted to a planet, and unseen forces are directing in a very suspicious and mysterious way their survival on this place. They have no answers, only questions. But it has an overall spiritual theme that actually I gleaned part of from all these guys that I interviewed. And I've been working on it since I wrote it in serial form for a magazine in 1980. I've been rewriting it and reworking it all these years since, so I'm finally closing in on the finale.
So you were a photographer interviewing photographers, which must have made that a much more interesting set of interviews.
It did. I was managing editor of Outdoor Photographer magazine. That's one of the ones that came on later, and they just stuck me in as managing editor. But really, I was writer at large, so I would go interview these guys. Elliot, what was his last name? Can't remember now, but he was one of the premier color photographers in landscape photography. I might have told you this story. Elliot Porter, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank God one of us has a memory, or two of us. Elliot Porter was a wonderful statesmanly gentleman who I went to interview in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he told me a story about how Ansel Adams walked in, saw one of his color pictures, and looked at it, scowled at him, and said, "You don't get good whites," and stormed out of the room. Ansel Adams, the great black and white photographer.
That's a great story.
So I got to hear these kinds of anecdotes, and it was delightful and wonderful. So, yeah, I've had a lucky life. I've always stumbled into, through the things I love, getting to make a living doing the things I love. So that's enough about me.
So
unless you have more questions.
Luck is really important. And I think that if you're going to be creative, being lucky is very helpful, because a lot of the time people don't figure out how to combine photography and flying and writing and do that for decades. That is very fortunate.
Well, it's fortunate.
That's really fortunate. So why the three of us are hanging out here is because they're going to interview me, and I wanted you to know who they were.
Wait, now you tell us.
What?
No.
It's sometimes hard to talk about yourself, but if somebody asks you questions, then you can answer them. At least that was their brilliant idea. I wish I thought of it, but I didn't. But this is a really good idea. So have at it. Flame me on the left first.
Well, I guess let's give viewers a bit of perspective here. I mean,
okay,
you're pursuing a business concept that comes out of your background and your abilities, characteristics, and that is to give talks at high levels, corporations, events, that sort of thing, about the subject of innovation. And we find that, well, I'll speak for myself, I find that a fascinating subject, and I like your perspective on it. Anything from you, Jim?
Yeah, I just think you're one of the most fascinating people I've ever met. Not to embarrass you, but might as well get that out of the way. And so I'm always interested in hearing your take on things that I sort of have random thoughts about, but don't put into action or don't know how to put into action. So it's very useful for me personally. But also I think you cover a universal or a broad category of people, as you describe, creative outliers. Who have the same question: how do I get out there today, and what do I do?
How do I take the idea and make it exist in the world?
Right.
In fact, you're the chairman of the Silicon Valley Innovation Institute. I think it goes back to early 2000s?
2005.
2005. So if you could sum it up at a high level, what's your approach to the concept of innovation, how we get there?
So here's the reason why the Silicon Valley Innovation Institute needed to be founded. I noticed no red lights on any cameras, but anyway, I'll assume things are happening. It turned out that I had a lot of brilliant friends who were not necessarily doing so well. And that just being really smart and really creative and really talented is absolutely no guarantee of being able to earn a living. And I kept on running into people who had done brilliant things earlier in their life and been famous for a small amount of time. Mm-hmm. And then the world moved on and didn't take them with them. And they would end up with these other jobs which were sort of much lower profile than what they were doing. For example, I was at Apple for a long time. It was the guy who coined the phrase desktop publishing. And he held the first multimedia conference. His name was Jim Armstrong. Really brilliant guy. And he was an Apple evangelist. And I bumped into him at a CompUSA as a stock boy 10 years later. And I went, how could this happen? This is a brilliant, brilliant guy. But he was so far ahead of his time that nobody sort of knew exactly what to do with him. So I decided that there needed to be a safe place for brilliant people to go to tell each other about their ideas and not get negative feedback for it. So that's where the Innovation Institute came from. And you would think that Silicon Valley would be a place where you could be creative. But the managers have this annoying desire to have the people who work for them do what they tell them to do. And that's actually not what creative people have a strong desire to do necessarily. So I thought I would create an Innovation Institute, and I was kind of surprised that there wasn't one. Apparently it was the first one, which surprised me. And it's been running for 20 years, and we used to be in person, and now we're virtual, and it has the same goal. The same goal is to help people to become innovators and also innovation advocates, because some of the people who are innovators are never really going to be a business person, and they need an advocate just like an artist might need a representative. Because sometimes the people who are doing all the creating are never going to have a business model, and they need somebody else to do it for them. And so I've been doing the same thing for 25 years, sometimes on television here, sometimes in books, sometimes in blog postings, and always informally too. I like hanging out with creative outliers because they're fun. And I want more of them to become innovators so that they can get paid for being creative outliers. And particularly right now, why this matters is because the world is a mess. It arguably has been a mess always. But right now is the time we're alive, and it looks pretty messy right now. It's a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion. And I think this is a good time for innovators to create tomorrow, because we need a different tomorrow than the way today is. So that wasn't very brief, but that...
No, that was great.
But that's...
Thanks. You answered the question. There is one quote I heard that you relayed the other day, saying about an old colleague calling you, I want to get it right, a genius wrangler who practices gentle management.
Yeah.
This was in relation to a conversation we were having about innovation. So, you want to take a crack at what that means?
So this guy was my first boss. He hired me out of graduate school, and I still know him 45 years later. So he's probably biased, but very brilliant guy. Still, actually, the smartest guy I know. He was so smart. I met him at Bose that when they gave him a department to manage, he thought they were moving too slowly, even though they were all MIT graduates, including him. And he would go home that night and solve everybody's problems in his entire department, and come in the next morning, and they couldn't do their job because he had already done it all. So after doing this some number of times, they eventually took away his department because they decided he was a genius, but not so much at management. And so he noticed that I seemed to have more luck than he did at getting people to do things, mostly because I wasn't actually as smart as him, so I couldn't do all of their jobs overnight. So I ended up not really being in charge of anybody on paper initially, But a lot of smart people ended up in my lab because I was better at creating context than most of them were. So I created situations where these people could show how great they were. And that made them naturally show up, because instead of me telling them what to do, because I wasn't their boss and I couldn't really tell them what to do, I could go, hey, why don't we try this? Don't you think that would be neat? And eventually I accumulated a very significant percentage of the engineering department in my lab doing what I was dreaming up instead of what they were getting paid to do, which made people upset initially. But then they changed my title from researcher to manager of new ventures, because they said, well, you're creating new ventures like all the time. So why don't we like call you that, and then keep doing what you're doing, but now you can do it officially. To do that, when you have a bunch of really, really brilliant people around, is complicated, because brilliant people don't really want to be told what to do, especially when their boss is telling them to do something else than me. So this person who called me a genius wrangler said, wow, you've wrangled all these geniuses and they're doing stuff that you want them to do. I said, well, I actually don't. We co-created it. I didn't create it. We created it together because they're really smart people. But when I eventually left Bose, the chairman of the board, Amar Bose, said, I'm really glad that you're leaving, because it's my sandbox, and it's my tools, and it's my play, and I hired all these guys, and I pay all their salaries, and you keep on hijacking all the smartest people in the company to do stuff that nobody told them to do. And I said, so what, you didn't like the idea of us inventing the world's first digital piano? You thought that was a bad idea? Oh, you thought that computer acoustics, that was a really bad idea? Why don't we put sound systems in computers? So, I know that you didn't tell them to do it. And I did, but are you really upset about that? We did change the world several times. So what's the problem? Get over it. He said, I'm really glad that you're leaving.
Now you were heading to Apple after that, weren't you?
Yeah, basically after convincing Apple that they should work with Bose to put Bose sound systems in Apple computers, Bose said, no, we don't want to do it. I said, what? What? This would be increase the size of the company by 15% with a single purchase order. So I left, and Apple said, well, we don't actually need Bose, we need you. So they hired me, put me in charge of it, and then I went back to Bose and said, can I give you a purchase order to do this stuff? Because all my friends work here, and I've been trying to pitch this to you guys for 5 years. And Amar Bose, who's no longer with us, he said, I'm not going to reward you for your insubordination. I told you not to do that, and you did it anyway. And so that's why I've been in the innovation business, because it occurs to me that even if you have a good idea, and even if it works, and even if the market accepts it, it still doesn't mean that it's going to happen, because there are plenty of people who don't want change unless it was their idea. So that's why there needed to be an innovation institute, and that's why I'm still trying to help Creative Outliers do their thing, because they don't often get a chance to do their thing. You were very fortunate to do your thing. That's
I was, yeah. So when you speak to, let's hypothetically put you in behind the podium or wherever it is you do a keynote or a consultation with a corporation, which is, I know, something you're interested in doing. How do you preach these sort of revolutionary or anti-establishment kinds of philosophies and still get them to sign on to your presence?
I'll give you an example. There's an institution called the IEEE, Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. It's supposedly the world's largest group of professional innovators. They have 2 million members.
Oh.
And they have, I don't know, something like 160 different chapters around the world. And the 160 chapter heads are brought together to a conference every year. They hired me to give the keynote speech to all of the heads of all of the chapters of the IEEE, because there was an economic downturn going on and engineers were not getting hired, and they were freaking out about it. This was in, I don't know, maybe 95 or something like that. And so they hired me to give a speech because they knew that I would try to be like a cheerleader to the engineers. So I went out and I told them to stop feeling sorry for themselves, because the internet was about to take over the world, and we invented it. I said, the people in the IEEE, we invented the whole damn thing. And the car is parked in your driveway, and you have the keys to it, and you know how to drive it, and you know more about it than anybody else in the world does. So stop feeling sorry for yourself because we own the future. So that was an example. They really liked that because everybody else was crying in their beer about the fact that engineers weren't getting jobs. They said, that's nonsense. We own it. We own the future. We created it. Let's go out and exercise our muscles. And we did. And we started 1,000 companies. And those companies are the ones right now that control $10 trillion of the economy. 6 guys. 6 guys who are electrical engineers.
Okay. Can you name a couple of names?
Yeah, Jeff Bezos, Jeff Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs.
Yeah, Kurzweil, was he in there somewhere? Or was he
Well,
doing
he
his
never
own thing?
controlled a lot of money. He just controlled a lot of hype.
Ah.
He was a brilliant guy who was really good at getting people to adopt his ideas, but not too good at making a profit. Because he started 3 companies, and he had to start the second one because he couldn't meet the payroll in the first one. So he started the second one to raise money so he could meet the payroll, and then he started the third one to meet the payroll in the second one. Wow. So he had brilliant, brilliant ideas, but he did not have a business model. That was the problem.
Well, one of the things I've heard you talk about is what creative outliers have to think about, sort of in terms of their changing their perspective as they try to move forward and get their concepts out into the world.
So here's the chief problem. Creative outliers have a tendency to create their own world and then go live in it. The problem is that they need stakeholders.
Speaking to a novelist, that's a little disturbing.
Well, the thing is, you can't do anything by yourself that's big.
Yeah.
You need stakeholders. And whether you call them investors or colleagues or permission givers or decision maker, whoever they are, you need to get more people on your side than yourself. And that means that you have to put yourself in their place. And that's 10 different places because you need 10 different stakeholders. So it's not just that you have to get out of your own head, you have to get into all of their heads. Otherwise, they don't have a lot of motivation to play a role. So you have to create a framework that includes their dreams, and profit has to usually be part of that, or at least enough money to be sustainable. Because it's horrible when you start something and you get pretty far in it and then you run out of money and you have to stop. That is really heartbreaking. Take a bunch of creative people, they raise some money, they hire a bunch of people, they go out and they get part of the way there, run out of money. That is really bad. So you have to think about, well, what are the set of resources that I need to get to where I want to go? And I need some marketing, I need some finance, I need some manufacturing, I need some, a lot of things. This is hard for creative people because even though they're creative, they put all their creative energy into the works that they're creating. But they don't usually put that much creative energy into figuring out how to get into other people's points of view. You really need to be able to switch your perspective depending on who you're talking to make what you're saying emotionally relevant to that person so that they give you permission to keep talking. Otherwise, they shut you down. If you go in to give a pitch and you have in your mind like a half an hour's worth of stuff you want to say and you're not relevant within the first 5 minutes, they kick you out of the room because they usually have a lot more power and money than you do, which is why you want them as a stakeholder.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, the analog to that, too, in writing books is, they always tell you to make the first sentence a grab or a hook, so to speak. I know you've talked about hooks in a broader sense.
So that's the key. To have creative people not use all their creative energy on their works, but use some of their creative energy on their relationships to make sure that they are mutually satisfying.
Yeah, Tony Fadell, I was talking about his book, I think, to you a few months ago. I think the book is called Build. And one of the chapters in that I found fascinating, in part because it represented a weakness on my part that I recognized as I was reading the chapter, is about networking. Now, he's talking largely about the tech field, but try to find people that have the same interests and passion of yours. But that goes across the spectrum, I think. It's not just the creators, but it's also the people who are looking to build a business.
Yeah, so I actually tried to convince Tony Fadell to become the president of a startup I created called Transonos. It meant all sound. I was trying to make sound-centric computers, and he had quit his job at Apple because when Steve Jobs knew he was dying, a short list was created of successors, and he wasn't on the list. And he was really pissed because he was actually responsible for the technology that led to the iPod, to the iPhone, the whole mobile devices. And Steve didn't put him on the short list, mostly because Tony Fadell didn't know how to have a relationship with Steve. Not to blame Tony, a lot of people didn't know how to have a relationship with Steve. But but Tony suffered from that. He should have actually been near the top of the short list.
Well, he had been for periods of time. I can remember Wall Street Journal. I can't think of the writer who really covered quite deeply.
Walt Mossberg?
Yes. I can't, but you can remember. Excellent, thank you. See, it takes a village. And he had been, sort of on the short list for a period of time. But I don't know really what happened, but basically he fell off that list. And I think your reasons why he did, it's probably spot on. But I actually worked with him. He had hired me with he had a startup. This was at the end of 1998, I think, 97, 98.
Before he founded Next.
No. This is Tony when it was a startup called Fuse.
Not Next.
Fuse is what it was called.
No, the thermostats, the smart thermostats.
No. That's
Nest.
Nest.
No,
Nest. That's quite some time later. So this is before he worked at Apple, and it was a time when MPEG was like Napster, and it was becoming a big thing. It made a lot of sense, except there wasn't really very easy ways for getting your music on your device. Most of the ways, or all of the ways, was basically illegal. So he was exploring the concept of connected consumer electronics. And when the dot-com happened and all the venture capitalists disappeared faster than light, 6 months later he was at Apple bringing the iPod to Apple. And that was basically, the first product that Fuse had been exploring. My brush with greatness, by the way.
Well, he found this really small disk drive, which ended up going into the iPod.
Yeah.
That made it possible.
Yeah.
You couldn't make an iPod until Tony found that drive on a trip to Asia.
That's right.
Like a compact flash, was it? Or
No, this was an actual hard
moving
drive.
disk, a small hard disk drive.
Yeah, this goes back before, flash drives would have
them on
been
my
so
cameras.
incredibly expensive at that point, if in fact even technically possible.
Yeah, the very first cameras, digital cameras that I had a small mechanical
That's
disc in
right.
them.
Yeah.
I thought they were called compact flash, and they had a disc about the size of a quarter inside.
Yeah, but it was a
hard
spinning
disk.
mechanical magnetic encoding.
Yeah.
Like a regular hard drive in a computer, just a small scale.
Right. Is that what you guys are talking about, or something
Yes,
else?
that's what
is.
we're talking about.
Same thing. Okay. Yeah.
And we're going down memory lane.
Yes,
Sorry.
it's memory lane
That's
time.
okay.
Electronicus.
Ask me a question.
Ooh, you know what I want to know is one of the notes we made here was somebody called you. You mentioned a genius wrangler,
Yeah.
and you came up with a phrase. I think yesterday we were talking about it in the guide on the side. I don't want to spoil it. I want to hear it from you.
It was a great, actually.
Isn't that a great quote?
It was.
So somehow, I'm not 100% sure how this happened, the dot-com boom came and went, and I decided the business world was completely insane, and I didn't want to be part of it anymore. So there was a college that had been calling me up for 5 years saying, we'd like you to teach a course in acoustics. And I said, why would I want to teach a course in acoustics? Working at Apple, I make 10 times more than you're going to pay me. But then when I quit the whole dot-com world because it seemed nuts, I had to then find a way to connect with people. And now I forgot which question I was trying to answer. I'm sorry, the dot-com world.
The sage on the stage.
Sage on the stage. So I got a job at a college
phrase.
as an adjunct professor to teach acoustics. And after the first semester, I went to the dean and said, hey, could I teach a course in something like different than acoustics? And she said, well, we did hire you to teach acoustics. I said, I'll still teach acoustics. She said, what do you want to teach? I said, I want to teach a course called aesthetic engineering. And she She said, I know exactly what you mean. I said, you do? And she closed the door of her office, and on the back of her door to her office was a picture of a Ferrari. And she was Italian. And she got her PhD in Italy at the Enrico Fermi College, University, whatever. She said, that's aesthetic engineering. It's high performance, it's emotionally relevant, it's technically robust. I said, you do know what I mean. She said, why do you want to teach a course in aesthetic engineering? I said, well, because the internet sucks. You have choices between websites that either look great and don't work, or ones that work really well and who cares? They're so boring that you don't want to play with them. So I'm thinking if there are Roman aqueducts that are still up, architects knew something about aesthetic engineering. They built things that could last and look good and feel good, and we're still talking about them. And industrial designers knew something about it in designing sports cars. I said, so how come nobody's doing this with the internet? How come it's a place that is yucko? Emotionally, it is not emotionally relevant to me. It's actually distressing because I go online and I try to do things and I go, why do they think that one size fits all? We're all different from each other, and we have a random access media, and they insist on giving everybody in the world the same message in the same way and pretending that it's a trifold brochure, even though it's a website. I go, that doesn't make sense. Some people care more about numbers, some people care more about words, some people care more about pictures. Why don't we make some adaptive content?
For instance.
Or sound.
Yeah.
So why don't we make media-rich content that's adaptive to people, that's emotionally relevant, and call the field aesthetic engineering, and claim that we're following the footsteps of Pythagoras and the old Roman architects and the industrial designers in Europe, and why don't we make the internet look cool? And since this school was called Cogswell Polytechnical College, it only basically had degrees in engineering and in art. And well, in MIDI also, but that was art and music side. So they didn't actually have other courses. It was a highly specialized school with several hundred students. So she let me teach this course. After doing this for a couple of years, I said, you know, these people, just because they could balance their heart and their mind doesn't mean that they can make any money. We're going to have to squirt a business model into this. So I'd like to offer another course that I call Innovation Management. She said, oh, that's like adding a business model to aesthetic engineering. I said, yeah, it's the third leg of the stool. And then when people graduate, they'll realize that they do have to make money, otherwise nobody's going to let them do their ideas no matter how cool they are. So she let me do that too. And then she died, and then they made me the dean. So I made it a required course for everybody in the school to take innovation management. And I said, everybody should be an innovator. And since I'm the dean, you have to, otherwise you can't graduate. And that worked pretty well. And the single best product I ever shipped in my whole life was at graduation, being the guy on the stage handing out degrees to people who were aesthetic engineers who had studied innovation management. That was more exciting than any other product that I ever made, shipping the product of people who were aesthetic engineers. So after I left and started the Innovation Institute and left the college, nobody else got any more degrees in aesthetic engineering or innovation management because they couldn't find anybody else who thought that they were like the same subject.
And what's the timing with the Silicon Valley Innovation Institute?
I started the institute in 2005. I taught at the college from 2000 to 2005 and a half, so they overlapped for 6 months.
Yeah, right. So basically, the institute was a follow-on from.
I changed myself from a dean back into an adjunct professor.
Yeah.
And I spent 6 months teaching the courses I wanted to teach and starting the institute because I still thought the subject made sense. But it wasn't so much that the 19 to 20-year-olds who were in the college needed it. I thought it was the 40 and 50-year-olds who were the creative outliers that needed it more than the 19 and 20-year-olds. So that's why I started an Innovation Institute. It came directly out of the program at Cogswell College. It was,
You've done that for 20
so
years.
the president of the college at that time had said to me, you know, all the other professors want to be a sage on a stage. You don't want to be a sage on the stage. You want to be a guide on the side. He said, yes, that's exactly what I want to be. I don't want to be the sage on the stage. I want to be the guide on the side and be in the room with a bunch of other smart people, and together we'll co-create something cool. So it was actually the president of Cogswell College who came up with that phrase, because she said, that's what you're doing. You're being a guide on the side instead of a sage on the stage. I said, is that bad? She said, no, it works. Everybody wants to take your course.
Yeah. When you've talked about this, you've talked about not thinking of yourself as a manager, but really as almost a cheerleader or a coach for a bunch of talented ball players.
I didn't like managers because managers told you what to do, and I didn't want to do what they told me what to do. So I projected on the other people like me, saying, well, I don't want to do what managers tell me, so probably they don't either, so I won't tell them what to do. That's when they told me at Apple I was a reluctant leader.
Reluctant
They said, you keep on ending up in charge of things, and then you didn't tell people what to do. I said, well, I sort of do tell them what to do, but very indirectly. It's sort of their ideas and my ideas, and they all come together.
It's more collaboration.
It's more collaboration.
Dictation.
Sounds like more fun. If I was an engineer and somebody made me want to go to work every day,
You know, it comes from when you're growing up and your parents say to you when you do something out there, who do you think you are? Okay. I'm not that special.
So if you're called to speak to some corporation, pick an example if you like, what are you going to tell them that's going to work in today's environment? What is it that you have to share?
I'm going to tell them that having great ideas and being well funded by your organization is not enough. You're still not going to be able to make it happen. Unless you have agency, which is the ability to make things happen, unless you can create a context within which what you're doing makes sense to a lot more than to you, it's just not going to happen. In fact, it has to make sense to a lot of people because you need a lot of help. So you have to become a context creator. You have to become a context manager. It's not the people that you want to manage, it's the context that you want to manage. You have to create a larger story within which everybody has, and I actually got this idea from Duke Ellington. So Duke Ellington had a bunch of brilliant prima donna soloists in his orchestra, and long after 19-piece jazz bands did not make sense financially because it's expensive to hire a 19-piece band when you hire an electric guitarist. He kept his band together longer than anybody else because he wrote pieces of music that highlighted the soloist's ability. You know, Concert for Cootie. Cootie Williams is like a trombonist. He wrote pieces that allowed his brilliant soloist to shine. And he had incredible loyalty because all these great players wanted to work for a guy who was creating pieces that he was showcasing them. And I thought, wow, running a software team is just like running a jazz band. You got a bunch of prima donnas who are actually very talented and very brilliant. I got to write pieces that they can play that shows out how hot they are. So I kind of got the idea from Duke Ellington, written in a book by a guy named Max Dupree called Leadership Jazz. He was the chairman of the board of like Steelcase or something, furniture. So he wrote, after he retired, he wrote a book called Leadership Jazz, and he gave Duke Ellington as an example. I said, whoa, what a great idea for Silicon Valley. That's what we should be doing. We got all these brilliant prima donnas. How do I write the equivalent of pieces? And by the way, I am a musician too who does write pieces. And that works, but it's a metaphor. It works for more than music. It works for everything. If you have a bunch of brilliant people, find something that they could show up and shine in, like this program. That's what we're doing. So that's the sage on the guide on the side thing.
Yeah, it's great.
You'd also raised the issue of, when talking to us a few days back, about the question of platforms, and do artists, writers in our case, need a platform? And I know that we're out of time now, but...
I forgot. I thought that was the first... Yes, let's do it. Platforms.
Well, we could do it another time.
Well, let's start it now.
Okay.
So do you want me to say why?
Why what?
Why do we need platforms?
Well,
you know why.
I would say when it comes to writers, we're talking about an environment that's been really disrupted. And I'll stick with a specific segment of publishing, what's called trade publishing, which is what you can think of your regular bookstore, the books you're going to find in a bookstore. Not professional books, technical books necessarily, but novels and memoirs and history and biographies and things about landscape. But it's been disrupted. For one thing, the whole range of what happens in publishing, trade publishing, has been disrupted. Starting, first of all, with a giant increase in the number of books being published. So traditional publishers, Random House, whatever you might want to think of as a traditional publisher, a lot of small houses too, they have pretty much stuck with producing 250,000, 300,000 books a year. Well, with the advent of self-publishing in its many different forms, we're talking about 3 to 4 million books a year. That's a huge increase. And so one of the challenges is, in that circumstance, is how do you get people to find your book when there's sensibly, 4 million books on the potential list.
So the barrier to entry to being a writer dropped to an order of magnitude less, and therefore the number of books that came out was an order of magnitude more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's advantages and disadvantages. Typically, I think the advantages win out, but one of the disadvantages is that in the older model, the traditional publishing model, you had editors. You had gatekeepers. You had people making judgments about whether or not the book met sufficient quality, sufficient market interest. Although, frankly, that's been lessening in traditional publishing too. I mean, but that's a whole other subject.
So was the publisher a platform?
What's that?
The publisher was the platform for the author.
Oh, quite definitely. And today, even with traditional publishers, the platform is much weaker. It used to be that if you were a published author, the marketing department in a publishing house, depending on the house, of course, would have money to market your book, would have money to send you out on a book tours, or would have a PR department that would get interviews and this sort of things that raise the profile of a book. Even with traditional publishers now, it's more or less, more often than not, up to the author to do this. They basically pared down. I think profit margins in trade publishing are not good. I mean, they're low margin. It's a low margin business. But there's difficulty in getting the reader's attention. This is really something that's exploded. There's the issue of social media and its impact. A lot of people, and this may have been more true 5 years ago than it is today, thought, social media is how you're going to reach your market. And, back when Facebook was actually doing what Facebook promised to do, which was to make one-to-one connections between people, that might have been the case. But that's not how people experience Facebook anymore. Facebook is not a networking platform anymore. It's a commercial platform. It's basically there to charge advertisers. And as a user of Facebook, if you ever do a count, when you're on Facebook, do a count how many of the posts you see in any 10 posts are from people who you're friends with. Chances are, I've done that count, and somewhere between 7 and 8 out of 10 are some form of commercial post. An algorithm recommendation, an outright ad, we think you'll like this. So my point is that it's really become an ineffective platform for a writer to reach new readers. Or even get the word out about the book.
Too diluted. It's
also, this happened in music. There were A&R.
Exactly.
Record companies did this function. And it happened for inventors because there were research labs like RCA and
Bell
Labs.
Yeah.
So the research labs became less differentiated from what people could do without them. And the same thing with the A&R guys, and the same thing with the print media program. So, but you're pointing out that in all these cases, quality control went down the tubes, because when you had a research lab, you couldn't really do bad science, or they would fire you. But if you do research on yourself and then you publish it, who knows what it means? And if you record an album in your bedroom and you release it, There's nobody to tell you that your guitar's out of tune.
Yeah. Although it's with music, the same factor of discoverability problems apply. I mean, the statistics are the vast majority of people that put up music on Spotify have something like 10 or fewer streams. Period. I mean, not just a day. The whole life of their music being up on Spotify.
So what you're saying is if these platforms are not as good as they used to be, that the role that they used to play is now put on the shoulders of the creator. They have to create a platform.
Right. It's always going to be on the shoulders of the creators, but the tools that were once touted as new, wonderful tools have sort of keep falling in value. So the question of discoverability ends up becoming, a matter of, if you will, a creative enterprise for the creative outlier, in our case, the writers.
Right.
How is it that we, in this, I like to describe it as a signal-to-noise problem, where it's a really bad ratio. There's much more noise than there is signal.
Right.
So, how do you break through? How do you find the right people? And so that's when I think about the concept of platform. I think of it in less about a specific technology or a particular channel or a particular specific technique. It's sort of more as there's a strategic approach that's now required.
Something else happened, though. So we're in a TV station surrounded by a bunch of expensive equipment. And whoever had access to the equipment, they had the platform. The gear is no longer the differentiator.
Right, yeah.
Now it's what's inside of you.
Yeah.
It's not dependent on whether you have a recording studio. It's now dependent on whether you yourself are more differentiated from those other 4 million
or
people.
a printing press, or a distribution company.
So this is a shift. It's now a shift away from the equipment and the capital more toward, okay, do you have something to say?
Yeah.
So we're still back to the squeaky wheel thing again. There have always been the squeaky wheels who, regardless of talent, high or low, would make a name for themselves. That example I gave you guys the other day, maybe yesterday, about this ad I saw on Instagram. Science fiction, great, wonderful series, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It was wonderful visuals, attestations, anecdote, what's the thing when people...
But it wasn't true.
But it wasn't true. Yeah, well, the people, anecdotes.
There's blurbs.
Yeah, blurbs.
Yeah.
So maybe the intersection of this platform conversation and these anecdotes from the keynoter are that maybe the path is you have to create context.
Exactly.
Right.
I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So
how does that happen?
Well, how does that happen?
Well, you have to think that it matters.
No, I mean, so what I'm trying with the book series is I call it my pen pal project. And what I mean by that is I'm been collecting the names of people who write about climate change, who write about climate fiction, people who have podcasts on this subject, people that have YouTube channels, people that have Substacks focused on climate change, climate fiction related issues. There's some literature-oriented people as well, and even I came across just yesterday this really terrific resource I had no clue of.
We need to bring it in for a landing, though.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the problem, bringing it in for a landing.
Down with flaps. Down.
So even though this program is called Harvesting Infinity, and we've actually been talking about Harvesting Infinity, it turns out the way to harvest infinity now is a different way. You really need to work on differentiation, but not just by going it alone, by being a cowboy. You need to actually be a collaborator. So collaboration has become a core competency for Creative Outliers. And that's a new deal, because most Creative Outliers weren't necessarily that good at collaboration. And now it appears that they're going to have to be, or get representation, that is.
Right.
So we need boot camp for context, basically, collaboration.
Right. But the thing is,
a lot of us don't know.
Collaboration takes work, no matter what form it is.
Right.
In the case of the Pen Pal project, I have to be writing and contacting and maybe repeatedly all these people.
Yeah, that's
and hope that I can present, as you were suggesting for Creative Outliers, what they need, the sense of what their value is, why they might be interested, how it serves them too.
Sounds like this is an unfinished topic that we can continue in subsequent episodes.
We could do a whole hour just on this.
But yeah, so if you want to harvest infinity, you better start creating context.
Amen.
This is Harvesting Infinity. We're still in episode 15, although it may go over. And I'm talking to Patrick, who knows a lot about Harvesting Infinity. He is harvesting it fairly magnificently. He's got this Studio 9 thing happening, which is an unbelievable space with a $250,000 sound system and a nice piano, and it's aesthetically good. And that's only one of his 2 studios. He has another studio too. And if that weren't enough to have 2 studios, he's also a musician, singer, guitar player. And I bet you play more stuff than that too. You would have. So let's see. I guess, what do we want to talk about? At least tell a little bit about who you are and Studio 9.
Sure. Yeah, well, I'm an audio recording engineer, and I have been for the past 30 years. I graduated from Full Sail University back in, well, hate to say it, but the early 90s, so quite a while ago. And I worked as a freelance engineer throughout Orlando, did some work with Disney, did a lot of work freelance for different projects of artists, well-known and not so well-known. And since I was a young person, I was involved in bands. My father was a country musician. So I just got the recording bug, really early on. I'd say by 16, I was already very interested in music and recording. And that's what made me chose to go to Full Sail right after high school. And like many of us, you get that recording bug, and you start getting gear and trying to make the best recording you can, and then being in the different studios. Everybody has different equipment, so it's a learning process that never stops. Even to this day, I mean, there's so much to learn.
So did you ever feel like you wanted to design equipment because the equipment that you had didn't do exactly what you wanted it to do?
Yes, yeah. I think that's one of the things we definitely come across. And if somebody doesn't come out with it quick enough, if you do have the resources, it's kind of nice to build something.
Well, you've got a situation that is a newly built thing, and it's continuing to evolve. So you're still involved in the designing process because it's ongoing.
Yeah. So Studio 9, I had the pleasure of going down there and introducing myself to the engineer that was down there at the time, Dave Dennison, who's quite a well-known engineer himself, worked for the Myers Sound Company, and he was the engineer there for the last few years, since the get-go. Wonderful guy, and he introduced me to the space, and I was looking to do some jazz recording there, and I just wanted to learn a little bit about it. And the architecture is just beautiful. It's as you've seen, it's a big open space that can hold up to 100 people basically comfortably for a show. But it has the Myers Constellation system in there, and I'll talk briefly about that, but that's basically 45 speakers in the ceiling that are being used when we do a performance there. And it's coming from the ceiling, so it's immersing you in sound. And I can actually change the zones. We can move sound around the room. But one of the other benefits that's pretty interesting with it is because there's microphones placed in the ceiling at strategic positions, it can actually take the sound of the room, and then reverberate it, or basically reproduce it with certain algorithms that can allow us to have a reverb in there, anything from a dead space to a cathedral, with the flick of a switch, as you've heard.
Is this related to when musicians do something called a convolution integral? Is this doing that kind of a thing?
It's kind of that thing, yeah. I mean, it's capturing the room and then re-outputting it through those speakers with decay settings. So it's a very fine tuning process that's done by Myers. They actually come in and tune all of the rooms so that you can get the right sound everywhere. The idea also is that it's a stage lift. So everything in the room is basically amplified so that you can hear everything very clearly no matter where you sit.
And how many different zones do you have?
So when we're doing live performances, like I said, there are 45 speakers in the ceiling, and we can actually use a program that's created by Myers to move sound around to any of those speakers. But when we're doing a show, a live show, basically I have it set up into 3 zones: above the stage, above the middle of the audience, and to the rear of the audience, so that I can actually control the volume levels of each of those spaces independently. It gives me a little bit more flexibility. Over the stage, you might not want to have it as loud. And then in the back of the room, you might want to have it louder. But no matter where you sit in the room, you're going to get the best of the sound because there's speakers right above you and on the sides of you. It's amazing.
So besides traditional performance, do you have experimental people showing up who want to treat it like a temporary installation for a sonic one-of experience?
We absolutely do. We also have a residency program, which I'll talk just briefly on. That's being introduced, but it's called the Institute, and that's basically part of the Fresh Grass Foundation, which I'll talk a little bit about. But this is going to allow people to come. They can do recording residencies and they can do workshops. And one of the things that we do at Studio 9 is we can have a residency there, and we've had residencies there where we can use electronic music, for instance, where they'll actually develop the sound for the room so that they can move certain elements of the music to certain areas within the room. And of course, that takes a little bit of time. You can't just set up and do that one. So that's going to take maybe a couple of days where you could go in there and start creating the music in the space so then you could perform it. So those are, they could turn into a couple-day residency, almost like an installation. But for our normal performances where it's basically a band coming in for just a one-night performance, I still use the system and I use all its benefits. Probably not the moving around as much in the room, but the clarity, it's an interesting way of mixing. Normally we're used to front of the house, where basically we have the speakers pointing at the audience and you mix from those 2 direct sources. This is a little bit different. When you come to the space, what I'll actually do is have them perform acoustically, and then I will simply add in all of the elements that I've mic'd to the system as needed. So for instance, you may not have to bring the drums in at all. The acoustics in the room is plenty enough, but maybe the bass will have to be highlighted, or the acoustic guitar, vocals. So it's a different way of mixing. Monitors are done last because basically they could be good enough with the sound without the monitors. So it's interesting.
I know that you're familiar with Bose as a company, and they used to have something they called direct reflecting as their technology, where the Bose 901 had 8 speakers facing backward and 1 forward, and they were bouncing sound off the walls. This sounds like a much higher order level model of direct reflecting, where you can really control those reflections, or what would sound like reflections. And they built their whole company on that. That concept is actually what made Bose a company.
Wow. Well, I know that their line array systems, the small systems, have been amazing for me for the past, what is that, I think 15 years when they came out with the L1 Compact. I think it's been at least 15 years. And I know using that just behind me, it's an amazing system where I can hear everything just fine. It's my monitor system. And it has like 180 degrees disbursement, I believe.
Yeah, as we had discussed before, I have an L1C also. And when I got it, I had owned a lot of other PA systems, but I liked this so much that I stopped using the other ones. And I eventually sold off all the other ones because this was so much more convenient. And I wasn't in like a heavy metal band. I was playing like jazz. But for intimate music, wow, it was killer.
Oh yeah.
And I played with another guitarist for like 35 years. So he'd had one and I had one. So we'd do gigs with two L1Cs and we could easily do a wedding for a couple hundred people. Easy with the two of us.
Yeah.
But so that touches upon another topic that we didn't talk about, but I'm sure we both know about. We kind of grew up in the analog world and it's a digital world now. And we have many more degrees of freedom of things we could do now than we could do before. But a lot of times people are dissatisfied that the digital world doesn't sound as good as the analog world as well. But I don't think that's an inherent disadvantage. When people say, oh, digital can't sound good, I go, well, that means you're just like not doing it right. Digital can sound as good as analog. And I'm sure that for some people watching this, they're going to go, oh, no way. Digital can't sound as good as analog. But there's nothing inherent about digital that makes it have to sound inferior to analog. You just have to do more stuff. And you can do more stuff.
Yeah.
So there are many, you don't need $1 million recording studio now to get some really good sounds. You can buy some plugins that are not necessarily the real cheap ones, but like the $100 ones, not the $10 ones. And boy, it's pretty hard to tell the difference between those plugins and real stuff. I have some Universal Audio plugins, and I've just discovered SSL, Solid State Logic.
Oh yeah.
And I used to have an old Fender Twin Reverb pre-CBS amp, and Universal Audio has these emulations of things like an old Twin, and it really behaves like it. It's nonlinear. It breaks up in the same way, pleasing way. So it's pretty mind-blowing to me that we both have used synthesizers in the past, and you're one of the only people in the whole world I know that even knows who Ensoniq is. But you can emulate everything from a Mellotron to a Ensoniq to a Synclavier, and you can buy a pile of software from a company called Arturia.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's called the VA11 or something. It's like 46 different instruments, and any one of which would cost many thousands of dollars, but you can get all 46 of them for a few $100.
Yeah.
And it sounds pretty good. It sounds really good.
Yeah.
Their augmented instruments even sound better than regular instruments in some ways. So we live in an incredible time where I know people are complaining about the past, but I think this is a wonderful time to be alive as a musician. You have incredible choices. So, speaking of that, did you want to play any music or not this one?
I could play something. Yeah, we could give it a try. It's funny how Zoom picks it up sometimes, but I think we could give at least a song a try. And
So there are now a lot of settings within Zoom for audio. Have you messed around with them?
yeah,
So there are some settings that will make it actually work.
yeah. So I've set it to the I guess what they call it on the version that I'm on, because I just basically went really efficiently, let's say, today, and I just threw up my phone. But the original sound enabled is what I think you're looking for. So, but yeah, I could play a song just to give you an idea of
Yeah.
some of my
Well, you're a
stuff.
talented guy. I want to get, besides all the engineering stuff, you got the musical stuff going on too. So,
Well, thank you, thank you. I'll do a song that's called "Moved Out, Moved On," and kind of see my guitar. I've got a Taylor here.
nice.
And we'll just give this one a try. A little bit of anyways.
Can you either move the camera? Can you get more distance so we can see your fingers a little bit?
Sure. Let's see here. So I'll just pull it back a little bit here.
Yeah.
I'll do it the old school way. Here we go.
Yeah.
Is that a little better?
Yeah, because I want people to know that you're actually really playing this.
Yeah. I'm sure they'll know because I'm sure I'll mess something up on the way. You looked at me like I'm crazy, but I disagree. Well, I was the one consumed by jealousy, so I took the action, yeah, I set you free. Now I'm the one who's crying hopelessly. Well, I moved out, but you moved on, yeah. Well, I moved out, but you moved on. Well, all of my friends were saying, you better beware. You know that love can blind you, and she won't care. So I took the action, yeah, I set you free. And now I'm the one who's crying hopelessly. Well, I moved out, but you moved on, yeah. Well, I moved out, but you moved on. Well, I moved out, but you moved on.
Great, great. No, that's wonderful. Well, the Enya doesn't really quite sound like a Taylor,
Uh-huh. But it
but
is really unique to be able to have reverb and chorus.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, that was really nice. So, how long have you been? So, you were a songwriter first or an engineer first?
Songwriter, and guitar player. I started off. My father was a country singer and a folk singer, so I got really accustomed to that. And my mother did harmony and wrote a lot of the songs, and we did some touring as a country artist. So I followed along, and then by 17, I got into a rock band, local rock garage band, and then we started playing out. By 18, started recording with, at studios, but then on my own with like a Fostex Model 160 4-track cassette, which I'm sure you remember those, where basically the tape hiss after recording multiple takes and bouncing things, the noise of the tape was usually much louder than the actual instruments.
So, did Fostex have DBX instead of Dolby?
They had DBX, that's right. Yeah, yeah. And I also, when you mentioned the Ensoniq, I had an Ensoniq SQ80 with an 8-track sequencer. And at the time, you could have, I think there was only a few software companies out, not many. I think it was like Vision, Opcode, Cakewalk, I think eventually popped on there. But you couldn't do a whole heck of a lot on the computer, but on the SQ80 you had a little 8-track recorder that would record your MIDI input and then play through your sounds. So I used FSK. If you remember FSK, it was a sync format, kind of like SMPTE, but a little bit different. And that would, I'd record Stripe 1 tape, a cassette tape with FSK. And then when I hit play, it would trigger the SQ80's sequencer, and I'd be able to program my drums, bass, some orchestral instruments on that, and then use the 3 tracks on the Fostex for acoustic guitar, vocals, and then sometimes bounce that down. But it really made you think, and you had to commit. I think that's one of the biggest things that we find difficult in this day and age, with so many options and the availability to change things throughout the whole project. It's critical that we learn to commit to certain things and just say, this is what it's going to be, and move forward.
You know, you had to actually engage in critical thinking because there were you had to solve all sorts of different problems. And as we're now entering this realm where we have so many distributed sources of information from TikTok and YouTube and AIs and people and friends and articles, that there is no like one authority that you can actually ask, well, what do I do? Because they don't even agree with each other. So you have to deal with distributed sources of information. And you're also a guy like you're a songwriter, you're a singer, you're a performer, recording engineer. So you're dealing with a lot of different dimensions. It's dimensionally vast, and with distributed sources in all of these different dimensions. So you really have to sort of be the force of convergence in this whole pile of stuff to figure out what to do. And I think a lot of people are endlessly spinning around, trying options and never landing on anything.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, even with whichever DAW, digital audio workstation that you use, they usually come with basic applications, plugins. You know, and I always teach at least the students that come here to Williams, because this is actually Williams Studio 275, by the way. This is the college recording studio that I manage and engineer and train students and mentor students on. When they come here, they're like, well, I heard this plugin is the great plugin to use, and this one should be used, and this one should be used. And I basically just point at, let's just use the basics that come with the program you have. A very basic compressor, a basic EQ, and let's just stick with those until the need arises where you need to do something that's gone beyond that plugin's possibilities. Because, I mean, for the most part, you can use these basic plugins, and they work just fine. It's just when you need to go beyond those, and I think it's good to start with your basics, really learn those tools, because that's all they are, is tools to do something. And then when you've finally run out of what that capability is of that plugin, then you move on to the next plugin and try something different.
And right now, I'm on a little M1 laptop, a MacBook Air. It has more processing power than any musician would ever need. You can have 1,000 tracks in Logic, and I very rarely need more than 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
And when I have friends who have 50, 60 tracks because they recorded 20 takes of their guitar solo, and then they're cutting and pasting measures from different takes. I don't want to do that. I basically don't do takes. I do like one take and I record it. And if it's not good, then I do it again. And if I get beyond 3 takes, then I consider that I don't know it well enough. And I should go back and learn how to play it better.
Amen.
And so this technology, it creates a lot of ways to hide from like doing it right. And what you just did with the guitar and your voice, it's totally fine for performance. You don't need 50 tracks. You don't need 50 plugins. You don't need pedals. You don't need anything. You could do a totally legitimate thing just with your guitar and your voice. And if you decide to add, a few things, not too many, that's enough. And more than that, it starts to be counterproductive. So I think we now have gear that has abilities beyond what any person would need. But not everybody needs the same one, so it does a lot of stuff because what I needed and what you needed might not be the same, or actually, in our case, it might be the same. But I continue to run into people who are lost in space and technology. And I only became a technologist because I performed my first gig when I was around 16. I played somebody's Sweet 16, and somebody told me how to play the bass like 3 days before the gig. And within 6 months, I was recording in Electric Ladyland Studio in New York City.
Wow.
I got offered to go on tour with the Joffrey Ballet and the Pit as a bass player. I said, yeah, but I can't really read the music for the Joffrey Ballet. They said, it doesn't seem to matter with you. You just play it. But my parents were afraid I would starve to death and end up living under a bridge. So to make them happy, I got a degree in physics in acoustics. But I really wanted to be a musician, but my parents thought that was a really terrible idea. So I became a technical person. And now that I'm 72 and not 17 anymore, it took 55 years, but now there's nobody to tell me not to do it anymore. So,
So there you go.
you
Well,
know,
much like yourself, I enjoyed playing music and writing songs as a teenager and in my 20s, but I did know in high school, I think probably because of seeing so many musicians struggling in my area, that that's one of the reasons I decided to do the technical thing more for a career than the music aspect. I mean, I still play music. I love to write songs. It's really my passion, but technology was a good way for me to kind of fuse being able to listen to music and help other artists. But at the same time, I like the technical things. I'm a bit of a technical nerd, so thought that was the perfect merge where I could actually become I could do a technical service and be a service person by being an engineer and still be involved in music. So that's kind of why I took that path as well.
in fact, the person who introduced us, Dave Smith, is another musician who became an engineer. And, it's because he became an engineer that he could afford to refurbish his Steinway.
Yes.
If he were a musician, he wouldn't have been able to afford to do what he did. So
Yeah.
I think we've probably used up the amount of time we're supposed to, but since nobody's telling us to stop, I want to go a little longer. I want to talk about, I mean, both personally and also for the rest of the world. I have this group called the International Composers Collaborative, who are Juilliard alumni, and we want to figure out how to apply to get a residency and come up. I did fill out the forms for Studio 9. I filled it out and sent in our website, and we are doing concerts, but it would be great to find out more about how to do that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I still would like to do what Dave Smith did and do just a regular performance without 50 tracks
Yeah.
or a string quartet. So when you have time, I'd love to have that conversation. Are you guys pretty booked up well into the future?
We're pretty big booked up, but it's you can use the info at studio9porches.com. And that's the general email box that comes into myself and to a few other people that manage the residencies. And we're always looking for new things to do. And, if we don't have something coming up that's available, holding something for, down the road a little bit is good as well. So it's getting a lot bigger. We're starting to do a lot more. We still have we have a lot of workshops that are going to be coming up. So definitely have people keep their eyes out for Studio 9. Go to the website, keep up to date with the performances. Like I said, Studio 9 was developed by the founder of the Fresh Grass festivals, which are 2 a year now. Yep, that's Chris Wad. And they developed Studio 9, with the thought of helping musicians and taking music that maybe isn't mainstream, being able to record. There's a full Pro Tools recording system in the basement of the studio, and it's a wonderful It's a wonderful studio with great preamplifiers. So I mean, you got a really great front end, great microphones, great speaker systems. So it's a wonderful place to record at as well. And if you can just come to the space, you can see what I'm talking about just by going there and just seeing the architecture and hearing the system. It's a great place to do live music, especially if you're going to record live music in a group. So yeah, just keep your eyes out for that and come see a show.
And sometimes people even get you as an engineer along with the space,
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
which is a
And
fantastic addition.
and this, just real quick, this is Studio 275.
Uh-huh.
Just kind of see out there, it's a full video production studio, as well as audio recording studio, and that's here at Williams College. Um, so it's amazing the amount of wonderful musicians that we have in this area. We have an open mic at Studio 9 every Tuesday night from basically 6:30 is sign up, and we go till 9. So if you want to hear some great local artists and also see the space, Tuesday nights are a great opportunity to come up and check it out. And I'll probably be there and happy to talk with you and show you around.
Excellent. Well, that was my introduction to it. I've been there twice, and I love the space, and definitely want to throw our hats in the ring for trying to get some use of the space too. But
Absolutely.
that was really great. So you're having a really great life, combining a lot of different things that you love in a pretty unique place. I mean, both Williams and Studio 9 are both pretty unique places.
Yes.
That's why you have a big smile on your face.
Yes, I'm very fortunate. I'm very fortunate. And the people in this area, uh, they're great. We have so many good musicians in this area that are very humble and easy to work with. I think there's a great musical community between all of us, South County, up here. A lot of great musicians, and just get out there as much as you can and meet with people. That's how it's all done, networking.
So for everybody out there, go to the Studio 9 website, go to a show, introduce yourself to Patrick. He's a serious creative outlier, and it's an incredibly innovative situation. Uh, Perfect topic for this show, harvesting infinity. You got some serious harvesting going on there of infinity, no question about it. So thanks for taking the time. I wish we could have actually had you here in the studio,
Mm.
because, then I could have played the Enya with you, but but you didn't need any help. You were fine.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Okay, talk to you later.